Hello, I'm David Judson, Editor-in-Chief of Stratfor. With me today to talk about Stratfor's quarterly forecast is Reva Bhalla, Stratfor's Director of Global Analysis. Thanks, Reva.
Thank you, David.
Before we talk about the specifics of what we're looking at down the road, however, I was wondering if you could just demystify a little bit about what a forecast is. This is not crystal ball kind of work, and I think we need to clarify a bit about the methodology.
First, everything that's in this document, that stems from our overall global net assessment that we have on the world. And that comes from our decade forecast as well as our annual forecast. So we have a general idea of these are the major forces that are shaping the world. These are the main pillars that we're looking at that are shaping the international system. And then these are kind of the meta themes in between those large sub themes that will play out in shorter time frames. And the shorter the time frame that we have, like the quarter, the more we have to depend on intelligence. What are those little bits of information that give hints as to what negotiation is developing? If troops are massing in a certain place, what are their capabilities? Where we really have to get tactical down into the details to play out the events of the quarter.
Looking at this point of intersection between the broad dialectic and the devilish details. Obviously, right now, perhaps globally, the thing that people are most concerned about in asking questions is Iraq. And sometimes the Iraq discussion gets a bit oversimplified to be, is it going to break into three pieces? Are the Americans going to send in more troops? This is a much more nuanced look. Tell us your forecast here.
Yeah. So, as we've laid out in the annual, we said that U.S. foreign policy was slowly maturing in the sense that the U.S. was getting back to a strategy in which it could manage a balance of power in particularly troublesome parts of the world like the Middle East. And so as part of that strategy, the U.S. would pursue a negotiation with Iran. And in this quarter, we are going to see July 20th as a big deadline for their nuclear deal. They won't get the big final deal where sanctions are completely lifted and all of that, but we are going to see some serious momentum to keep that negotiation going. Now, as part of that, one of Iran's big imperatives is to make sure that it can consolidate influence in Iraq. And now we see Iran on the defensive with the growth of Islamic State stemming from its jihadist insurgency in eastern Syria. So when we look at the quarter now through that prism, we can see Iran's burden in Iraq essentially growing to a great degree because all the years that Iran spent trying to consolidate Shia power under a strong central authority is being undermined by its need to mobilize the Shia militias to actually reinforce Baghdad to hold the jihadists at bay.
This is interesting in one sense in that, while certainly not an alliance, American and Iranian interests are moving toward one another.
Absolutely.
And that's a change.
Well, I wouldn't say a change, right? Yeah. It's been a trend long in the making.
Right.
And so there's plenty of room for coordination between the Americans and the Iranians on the subject. The Turks, on the other hand, are playing a bit of a different game, and that's certainly going to be a complication this quarter.
And the Kurds. Maybe you could touch on that.
The Kurds, they had the opportunity of a lifetime this past quarter where the distraction caused by the Islamic State gave them the opportunity to basically go in and have the Peshmerga seize disputed territories along that Kurdish borderland. And the Peshmerga plans to stay. And now we have talk of a referendum and independence. Now, here is where Turkey will draw the red line, right? Turkey's been backing the Kurds on its energy export policy. And Turkey is very eager to use an alignment with the Kurdish government in Iraq to stabilize its own Kurdish situation at home. Independence is not something that Turkey can endorse. And so that is going to be very critical because the further that the KRG pushes on the independence line, the more Turkey is going to have to apply pressure on Erbil.
While having a presidential election campaign,
right.
At least through the middle of August. Right. So, all right, moving on from Iraq, pivoting up to Ukraine. What are we going to be looking at with the simmering tensions there over the next 3 months?
Well, so as we said last quarter that things are going to come down a few levels in the pressure level overall, and we are seeing things simmer at a lower intensity. Basically, Russia has no need to escalate tensions to a very significant degree. Their priority is on Ukraine, and Ukraine, they're playing the long game there. They want to neutralize Ukraine. So as we see the new president call for elections, parliamentary elections, that is going to cause more gridlock within the Ukrainian parliament, and we're going to expect to see that paralysis play out. That's fine from Russia's point of view because they basically want to decentralize Ukraine, exert influence at the regional level, and make sure that the West respects a red line when it comes to Ukraine's integration into NATO, which so far we think they will.
Good. So 3 more quick questions. Give us a hint on China, India, and this emerging thaw in U.S.-Cuban relations.
Okay, a lot to go over there.
Right, quick.
In China, we don't expect any major shifts on the economic issues. We see some credit easing there, China playing its same game and just trying to hold everything together. No major blow-ups expected there, of course. In the South China Sea, this is a good opportunity for China to take advantage of the U.S.'s distractions. Now, another distraction in the Middle East, its ongoing confrontation with Russia to reinforce China's position in the South China Sea. And of course, that's at the expense of Vietnam and the Philippines. Both sides will take care not to engage in a serious military confrontation, but accidental collisions is always something to watch for in that theater. India has a busy quarter ahead, very internally focused. What's perhaps more interesting is what's going on across the border in Pakistan as it proceeds with its offensive. And that's going to flesh out more militants into Afghanistan and impact the politics there. In Latin America, we are seeing some very interesting dynamism where the United States has initiated a dialogue with the Cuban leadership. That'll be slow going, but it's certainly very notable. And that is going to slowly influence the Venezuelan track as well. Of course, there's a very tight relationship between Cuba and Venezuela. And so the more Venezuela's economic problems mount, the more pressure and the more interest it may have in restarting that dialogue with the United States. So that's something in the longer term we're going to be watching for.
Okay, well, that's thank you for the glimpse of the next 3 months. There is that and a lot more in our quarterly forecast. Then we'll share all the details. Thank you.